Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Talalay. I'm the Cultural and Educational Affairs Officer here at the U.S. Embassy in Tashkent. Thank you all so much for joining this afternoon. You are in for a treat. I have spent the past few days with Negar Akhami, our special guest. It's been amazing. It's been an amazing time. So
And
thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So she's here. I think you already know a little bit. She's an artist from the United States. She has Iranian roots, which she will tell you about. And she's here as a part of a State Department program called Art in Embassies. It's a 60-year-old program designed to share American art and American artists with the world. And that includes ambassadors choosing artwork by American artists to put in their homes. It includes some of the artwork we have here in the embassy, in our embassies across the world, and it also includes the traveling, having artists from America travel overseas. And Negar has three of her pieces are hanging in our U.S. ambassador's residence here in Tashkent. And in fact, I can show you. We just received a catalog that includes her artwork on the front, and two other American artists whose work is in the residence. Anyway, you don't need to hear from me. You want to hear from Negar, so
One piece.
that's one piece. So is Sardor gonna click? I think. Anyway. So, Negar, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
And we're going to keep this very simple. We're going to let you all ask questions. But to start, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you were born in Baltimore, but raised in New Jersey, near New York City.
That's right.
And
My parents moved. My parents met in Iran in the 1960s, and they, as soon as they got married, they left Iran. And they went first to England, and then they went to the United States, to Baltimore, which is where she's from, which is a coincidence. And Baltimore is like an hour away from Washington, D.C. And when I was just 6 months old, my parents moved up to the New York City area. So from where I grew up in New Jersey, just over the river from New York City, you could see the skyline, the beautiful tall buildings of New York City. And my family really, we really used New York. It was really part of my life, my world. Every week we were going to the museums and galleries, and it was a rich experience.
and is that how did you become an artist?
I was just by nature a very visual child and very sensitive, and I had a huge imagination. And from a very young age, I think there was someone from Princeton who came to my school who wrote a letter to my parents saying that Negar is artistic and that you should nurture this. And my parents, were immigrants, and my father's a doctor, my mother was a nurse. They didn't really understand this. And I think by the time I was 10 years old, my father kind of finally listened, because many people had told my father about an art school in New York City, and they encouraged him to send me there. And so from when I was around 10 or 11 years old, I started going to drawing classes on Saturday mornings, painting and drawing, and it was there that I really learned a foundation for art, and art was just part of my identity at a very, very young age. So,
can you tell us about what talk about your Iranian background and also your influences in your art? What were your influences?
So in terms of my Iranian background, when I was a child, when I was little, it was the 1970s. And that was a time where it was easy to go to Iran, and the United States and Iran were in good terms. They were allies, and in the summer vacations and holidays from school, my family, we would go to Iran for like a month maybe, and it was usually like in July or August, and it was a very rich experience for me as a young child, because it was such a different feeling from being in America. I felt so loved because all of my cousins were there, and my aunts and uncles and all of my grandparents, and just the beautiful art and architecture really influenced me, I think, at a young age. And also the women were so glamorous that I just was so impressed by that. But that really got cut off because when I was 8 or 9 years old, I no longer could go to Iran. There was a revolution, and a lot of Iranians were leaving Iran and to come to America. So suddenly there was more and more Iranians in America than there was when I was little. And it was a really difficult time to be Iranian American, because suddenly Iran and the US had a terrible relationship, and I had a hard time in school. Like, it was really, really challenging. And so I really pushed my Iranian culture far away from me and became more and more American, I think. And art was really the one thing that made me feel very proud, I think, about being Iranian. As a teenager, I had a lot of exposure to beautiful Persian miniatures and ceramics and carpets in our home, but also in museums in New York. And it made me very proud and inspired by the culture. And I also just loved, because we went to museums a lot in New York, I loved the art from European painters and American painters, both old artists from the 1940s and 50s, but then also artists living in the present day. I loved the freedom of the art. There was so much possibility in Western art and culture that I really felt inspiring, and so my influences are very wide. I even just love popular culture, just American popular culture, movies and cartoons, and I think everything really influences me, and I somehow put it all together in my own way, in my artistic language.
So were you constantly drawing, painting, and at what point did you say, oh, I could potentially do this as a profession?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. Art was just always in my life. Like I said, it was where I found my confidence, I think, at a young age. I think it was the one thing where people just gave me confidence, like, this is, like, you're good at this, and so in university, I didn't go to art school, actually. I went to Columbia University, which is a very good academic school in New York City. And I studied history of art too, but it was really an academic education. And I liked that, but I was still doing art on the side because it was New York City. I was able to go to the same art school that I went to as a child and do art on the side. But it wasn't until my parents, who were, immigrant parents, my father a doctor, my sister's a doctor, like everybody in their community were doctors and engineers. When at the end of university, my parents said, you have to go to law school to be a lawyer. And that was really difficult for me. And I don't think it's something I'm good at. It's not my character. It's not something that has anything to do with my strengths. And I ended up going to law school, and that was a really hard experience for me. And that period actually made me really need my art in a very emotional way, and it made me really more intense on my paintings. I was still in law school and doing my studies, and I even practiced law for a few years as a lawyer in New York City. But during that time, I had an art studio. I was doing exhibitions, and it's really that experience that made me feel the need to be an artist. I think if I didn't become a lawyer, maybe I would have tried to work in the film industry or do something that was creative and visual. But because my job was so completely different from the arts, that I felt this need, and it felt urgent. And so that's really what made me eventually get to a point when I was 30 years old, so later, where I said, okay, I have to give this a try, and I have to try to do this.
So you practiced law, and then you got a job as a lawyer at the Museum of Modern Art, which is one of the most amazing museums in the world in New York City. And you said that is where
Perfect timing.
Yes, thank you, Sir Dora. You said
Wow.
that is where you realized, I don't know if the light bulb went on or what.
It was, the realization was building throughout, even in law school and after law school. Before I took my first job, before the Museum of Modern Art, I went to Ireland for a couple of months to paint, and it felt amazing to only paint instead of just painting on the side. And so I knew even then, before I started my first job as a lawyer, I knew even then, but I was scared. You know, I'm the daughter of immigrants. Being an artist is scary. It's not stable. I like stability, and I understood why my parents wanted me to have a professional career. So it took me a couple of years to really get to the point where I was ready to quit. And getting to go to this museum every day as a lawyer was, I got to go to one of my favorite places every single day and to see incredible art. And it was very inspiring. It was an education. It exposed me not just to amazing art from 100 years ago, 50 years ago, but also from present day artists. And seeing that art really made me think, you know what? I feel like I could do this, and I feel as if I have a sense of what needs to be said that hasn't been said in the culture. And I felt kind of empowered that maybe I can give this a try, which seems crazy at the time, but it was really that time where I was ready to finally take the leap.
So we will open it up for questions, but
Yeah.
did you leave your job at the museum and then just go right to a studio, and then what happened?
Well, that's a good question, because so I turned 30 years old in April, and that's around then was when maybe a month or two later in June is when I actually told my boss that I'm going to resign, but I maybe gave it a couple of months. I didn't do it right away, and just so that they can have an opportunity to have somebody else come and I can help train them. But what ended up happening was my very last week of work at the museum was the week of September 11th, 2001. Do you guys know the significance of that date? It was really, really awful and terrifying to be in New York City during that. And to be quitting my job, to be leaving a very stable job, it felt like the world was ending. It felt like New York was never going to be the same. It was a very uncertain time. And so I didn't have a studio or anything. I just had my apartment. And in the beginning, I just worked from my apartment. And then I started going to the art school that I used to go to as a child, as like a studio, and I would draw. And so it took me like a year probably of working from home, that eventually I got into like a program that was really an inexpensive way to have an art studio. And it was a great little program where people from the artistic community in New York City, which, New York is a major center, international center for art, people from this contemporary art world would come and visit my studio. And so it was an amazing opportunity for people, for exposing my work to people, and also my work just got better during this time. And from then, I actually applied to artist residencies and graduate school. I ended up getting a master's in fine arts. And that was almost more of a professional kind of decision for networking, but it was also a way to make my work kind of tighter and better and get closer to a point where I could be more of a professional artist. So
So at what point do you know you're professional? I mean, once you sell something,
good
when somebody
question.
recognizes your,
I developed, I student developed my own style of work that was very identifiable, like this work is definitely Negar's and people, and it was pretty soon after my master's program ended. I got one more residency in an amazing, residency is it's like a gift of a studio. It's a grant where you're given a studio, a space to work. And you can, if you're a writer, you can actually do a residency to go someplace to write. Well, I was given an amazing studio, actually right near the World Trade Center in New York City, and that was an amazing, my work just kind of exploded in that residency. It just did so well, it thrived. So I made really significant paintings. And my first sort of real collector came, and he wanted to give me a solo show. I then had that show got canceled, but then I ended up having another solo show. That was when I decided that this is I have to start saying no to sort of side jobs, and I had to commit to my art more fully, and selling some paintings became my source of income at that point. So it took from when that was a period, it took a couple of years. It was 2001 when I quit my job. So that was around, I would say 5 or 6 years. So it's, to be an artist is a really difficult path, financially. You kind of have to make your own way. Nobody tells you how to do it. But it's very rewarding. It can be very rewarding and also very difficult. And it could take time. It doesn't, immediate success is not something you can plan on. You have to really want to do it and I felt as if I had no choice, that if I did not do this, that I would be a very unhappy person in life, and I had no choice. I tried this professional life, but that this was something I had to do,
So if any of our audience do want to be artists, do you have any recommendations for them?
I do, like I said, I think it's important to be really, really passionate and to feel like you have no choice, that you have to make your art in order to survive or to live, because it is a difficult path. I wouldn't just say lightly, like anybody should be an artist. I think everybody is an artist inside. Maybe it's not drawing and painting, it might be poetry, it might be film, and I think art is for everybody. And I think, I would hope that at some point in your life you engage more deeply in the artist inside of you, and in your own imagination, and follow that. But in terms of being a professional, I wouldn't recommend that to everybody. I think, again, you'd have to have a really strong need to do this internally. And I think, it's important to do research in your own country and to find what the opportunities are for schools, for artist residencies. And these are some of my influences as a young child, going to museums and art galleries in New York. And so I think to be an artist, the work is the most important thing, meaning your art is the most important. You have to find a place to make your work, a space to make it, and you have to do it. You have to do a lot of it, and then you can apply for some programs, develop a portfolio of works, and apply for schools. You have some good art schools here. I'm gonna visit some of them. Right? So.
Yeah, we've already been to, yesterday we were at, Sardor remind us, the National Institute for
Design and Art.
Design and Art. And
In
tomorrow.
Bukhara we have the Bukhara State University.
Impressive programs.
Does anyone have any questions for Negar? Yes.
Yeah. Have you been to Bukhara?
I did. That was my first stop, and I loved it. And we're gonna go again. So my husband just joined me today. Say hi to Bill. And, he just joined me today, and we're gonna go again for short visit. But it was like I had goosebumps on my arms just even getting off the plane. It was so beautiful. I mean, just everything about it. We visited this miniaturist's school. It's Ostad, you know, this master miniaturist who has a school. Does everybody know this place? I mean, they
I don't
should.
know. Are you from Bukhara?
Does
Yeah.
the name
Ustaz va shogird in Bukhara. Davlat Dashi.
I think
It's beautiful.
everybody should know this place in Uzbekistan and be proud of it, and what this person who's a sixth generation artist is doing to preserve the traditions of the miniatures and teaching kids as young as, was it 8 years old, to do amazing miniatures. And he put his heart and soul into teaching. It was just really amazing, and so I loved it. Are you from Bukhara?
Yes. Because I'm saying this because when you go to the Bukhara, you can see the huge Iranian culture impact on. But also, you know, the predominantly in Bukhara people are Tajiks, the similar language.
Of
Iranian
course,
language.
you know.
You feel like your second home when you go. That's
I
why.
did. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
It really means a lot to hear that. I really felt that way. I was crying. I had tears in my eyes when I got off the plane. I had memories, you know, memories from childhood that are like in your body almost. When you smell a certain smell, or when you see certain things that remind you of childhood. So memories of going to Iran as a small child, which I can't do. You know, I don't do this anymore. There's a big loss, a sense of sadness that I can't have access to this part of my life. And so that I got to go to Bukhara and to see that, and to see beautiful faces and people living in the center of town and having the chaikhana and the, you know, families and the beautiful craftsmen, the colorful crafts, it's like bringing it to life, and it was a powerful experience for me, and so I would hope to return again, even after this trip. Congratulations for being from there.
What do you know about the essence of art for our health, for our mental health?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it's essential. I think art, I'm gonna cry, actually. That's kind of like, obviously I need art for my own mental health. I'm very emotional. I think art can literally save lives. And it's not just making art, but even looking at art or going to the theater and when I go to the theater, I cry, I cry. We need it as humans to make connections with other people and to feel kind of universality. I think in life we could feel very alone in our emotions and feelings. And then when you experience another artist's point of view, it's a way to connect and know that you're not alone as a person, that we're all actually totally connected. And I just think that's, and also just as a way to feel inspiration. We all need inspiration, to feel an escape when life is difficult. Art can do so much for the soul that I think it's so important. I think more people, like I said, should be trying to make art. I think everybody, as I said, is an artist when they're children, and then we're taught that we're not artists somehow in school. They take that away from us, and I think it's really important to engage with that part of your being. So thank you for that question. It's a really good one.
Do you know Arabic, or it was the Iranian? I mean that I saw your pictures.
Yeah, the writing.
Yeah.
That's in Farsi. That's Persian,
Persian.
or Tajik, I guess you could say too, right? The Arabic script, the writing is Arabic, but the language is Farsi. And I do not speak fluent Farsi. When I speak Farsi, Iranians They say, why do you speak? They say I'm Kharaji, you know, I sound like a foreigner. And I actually, when I was in university, I studied Farsi for Persian for 1.5 years. Not for very long, but I learned to read and write a little bit, and my speaking improved a little bit. Because I only knew, when I was a child, I only knew things like ice cream, and I knew, I knew like how to say I love you to my grandparents, and of course hello, goodbye, very small things. And then I also knew swear words, bad words, because my father in the car when he was driving would, I know. But my Farsi Persian teacher in university said that those were the most important words to know. So, yeah.
I really want to study in Cal Art, California Art University, and I'm planning to apply faculty of 3D animation, cartoon animation, and what should I do? What should I do in my portfolio for enter successfully, for achieve, for get scholarship?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not a great person in terms of applying for scholarships. I don't really know how that, because I went to art school so late in life. I had, you know, I paid for my own education, and I didn't. But so I do think it's important, in addition to having a strong portfolio and talking to your art teachers here about your portfolio, and having them review it and maybe say, like, do you think this is good? Do I need more? Maybe even talking to people that are ahead of you, like who maybe, if you know anybody that had sort of a master's in 3D animation, maybe you could ask them for advice to look at your actual portfolio and see what's maybe missing or what you might need. But it's important to know how to write about your work. And writing an artist statement is an important thing, and that might take a lot of drafts, and maybe looking at other artist statements, researching artists that you like to see, and you know, certainly looking at the website and the application, how to apply section. I'm sure you maybe have done that already. Is this for a bachelor's of undergraduate? I did not do an undergraduate education in art, so I didn't even really have to do that kind of portfolio when I was applying at that age. But I'm happy to take your email address if you after this, and if I think of any more ideas to share with you, or even if I don't know too many animators, but if I think of it, if it comes to me later on when I'm back in the States, I'd be really happy to stay in touch.
And our Education USA advisors, do you know about Education USA? Yeah. They should be able to point you in the direction of potential scholarships.
But California has really good art programs. Aferin, you know.
Other questions? Please.
What do you mostly get your inspiration from?
Oh, that's a really good question. So it's a real combination of so many influences. Because I spent my young life, like childhood, teenage years, even in my 20s, looking at so much art, and even looking at a lot of movies, and it's as if my first 25 years of life, my eyes were just, and even I didn't need glasses, I had really good eyesight. And so I spent so much time looking that there are so many influences in my art and who I am but of course the Iranian, the Persian influences that you share here in Uzbekistan are so important to me. The colors, the beautiful, they're like jewels, you know, the colors of the miniatures, and the architecture, the tiles in Esfahan, and of course you have here in Samarkand and Bukhara. For me, it's like when I'm surrounded by that architecture and all of the patterns, it does something to me right here. And I want to, in my paintings, show how I feel in that kind of space. It's like I feel dizzy from ecstasy and feel dizzy from, it's just so wonderful that's my biggest, the ceramic tiles. If you saw my paintings in person, some of them almost look like ceramics, like they have like almost like a tile kind of quality. So that's probably my biggest inspiration, but I also love, from my Western artist inspiration, I love the freedom, and it's very playful. You know, American culture is very playful, and kind of the sense of humor is very big, and also it's very individualistic. And I think I felt that I wanted to have my own style, you know, not to copy what was done before, and I wanted to feel free in making my art, and also have a playful approach to my materials and my subject matter. And so I think bringing those Western sensibilities with the Persian influences is really what
It makes you really unique, I mean.
Yeah.
Mixing those Western and Persian art.
Yes, I think it makes it more, maybe you could say contemporary, not traditional in a way. Yes. Thank you.
When you published your first work, how did you feel? Did you feel scary or shy?
Published, like putting it in like an exhibition, or
Yeah.
oh, that's a really good question. God bless you. I've been, you know, I would say my very first exhibitions were when I was like 10 or even 11 years old. I think I've always felt proud. I get more scared and shy before talking to people. I get really scared beforehand. She sees me getting really nervous.
But I can't believe it, because she's such a great speaker.
Oh, it's easier to speak about art than anything else, because it's just from your heart, you know, what you do. But showing a work is really fun. I actually don't feel scared about that, because your work is finished. You know, you've already, the suffering is when you're in your studio and you're struggling to finish it, and maybe it's not how you like it, and it's a whole process that's very, so when something's not finished, that's where all the struggle, you know, art can be a struggle, which is a good thing, but when it's finished and when you know, are hopefully ready to show it, then I think it's fun to share your work with people. I didn't feel scared. Yeah.
Did you have haters?
Haters? Oh yeah. Taylor Swift says haters gonna hate. No, it's not, and I didn't have that easy. It's hard to open yourself up to criticism. That part of it is hard, because when your work is shown, you cannot control how people are going to feel about the work. You can't control how people interpret the work. It's in the public now, you know, you can't, and absolutely, there are definitely people that just hate painting. And when I started, they don't even want to see painting. They want to see video art. They want to see minimalism. And my work is the opposite of minimalism. And so if you hate color and pattern, and you're going to hate my work. And so in a way, as you get older, you realize that everybody has biases and everyone has opinions, and criticism is important to understand, because sometimes some of it can be very valuable. But so there's good criticism, and then there's also just bias, where people just love something or hate something, and you kind of can't control that. So
Thank you.
That's a great question, though,
Yeah.
because the idea that you know, some of your artwork is very playful and may not have a whole lot of other meanings, although I think pretty much everything you do has a lot of, it's very meaningful to you personally.
yes.
But people who are viewing it aren't necessarily going to understand it the way you presented it.
It's true.
So, can you talk about some of the work that's been, I don't know, that like I didn't know that the piece that's on the cover, I didn't know anything about that until
Oh,
you
yeah.
started talking. So
Maybe move to a different image. I wonder if meaning the Talitha Getty one?
yeah,
Oh, it might.
that might not be
If it's
in here.
in
But
here.
maybe
No, it's
the-
not actually in
But the
here.
Catherine Deneuve,
I didn't put. Oh, maybe I did put her in here.
I think she's in here. Sorry.
No.
I'm making you go through.
Yes.
I'm making you go through.
I know. It's fine. There she is. Yeah.
There she is.
There, that painting, for example. Yeah, I mean, there's many layers of meaning. You know, it's like a pretty woman with lots of patterns. But for me, I mean, I guess when you have an exhibition, you talk about a solo exhibition, your own, just where it's just your art in an exhibition. You have an opportunity to write about your work, and there's a statement about your work, and so it's a way to, if you read the statement, then maybe you understand the artist's intention a little bit more in an exhibition. And so this painting is of a famous French actress who's now older. This was a picture based on a photograph of her when she was young and very, very famous in the 1960s. And her name is Catherine Deneuve, and she's like almost like a typical, like classic French beauty, classic French actress. If you could just name one French actress, like Catherine Deneuve would be one, you know, that you would name. And she was photographed wearing a caftan. I mean, you all know what caftans are,
Yeah.
right? The same word. And of course, caftans have ancient origins in this part of the world, and Iran, here, Iraq, and of course North Africa. And in the 1960s, it was almost became very fashionable in the West for Western women to wear caftans. And there was something almost funny about it to me when you would read kind of magazines about American women talking about caftans. It was almost like completely separated from the origins, and almost to a point where the origins are erased. And I think I feel that a lot in just in America, like design, ornamentation, and architecture, carpets. I feel as if this art history that you share with Iran doesn't get enough credit in schools and universities and in the popular understanding of where things come from. And so things like French decorative art, or churches with beautiful stained glass windows. You know, even just in beautiful churches in France, it has the most beautiful blue windows, the rosettes. The rosette has origins in Iraq, like ancient Near East. It is, and yet it's so prevalent in Christian art, right? And even that blue that they used in the French churches was using lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, Badr Shah in Afghanistan. You know, just these motifs are really global. And of course the caftan is global in itself. And so it's a way to sort of take inspiration from French decorative arts in this painting, but then actually really bring it back to this region, Iran and Central Asia and the ancient Near East, to show that globalism has always existed, and in a way the like patterns are competing with the face of Catherine Deneuve. It's like a lot to look at, and it's refusing to be erased. It's like this history will not be erased, you know, in these paintings.
But I definitely wouldn't have known all
No,
that.
you
from
wouldn't.
looking at it. I mean, it's beautiful,
Yeah.
but I mean, now it's even more fascinating to me by having that.
There's layers of engagement, and even if someone just sees my painting and feels like a connection to it that isn't related to that's totally okay. You know, that's enough for me, for somebody to make a connection, like this reminds me of this, or this reminds me of that. You know, the Star of David's in there. When people make that connection, like that matters, because I want to show connections, connectivity. Iran was so isolated from America, and there's a perception of Americans that Iran is an isolated place. And I guess it gives me a lot of satisfaction to show that we're all connected, you know. So.
The questions.
How much time it required to painting this?
This I started during the COVID pandemic, and I did this at home when my children couldn't go to school and I couldn't go to my other studio, and it took a long time because my children were at home, and I was also preparing meals for them. And so I was painting like a little bit at a time, you know, like maybe just like 1 hour today, 2 hours another day, whatever. And it takes me a long time. Like, I'm not only working on this painting, like I'm working on like 3 other things, let's say. So I take my time with paintings because, I mean, I don't know, it almost took maybe 1 or 2 years for this painting, but I wasn't just working on it. In the beginning, I build bas-relief surface, and then I paint the colors, and then the pattern comes later. So it's many, many layers. So it takes time. And it takes time, you know, you look at the painting and you're like, one day you're just like, this is terrible. You leave the studio and you're like, this is a mess. I want to throw this in the garbage. And then you get some sleep, and then the next day you're like, this isn't so bad. Like, I could work with this. And then you know exactly, after you've had some distance from the painting, you go back to it and you know, like, oh, this part needs more work. Like, you have more clarity. And so that process of struggle and then takes time. So,
Other questions?
these were excellent questions.
Can you express your feelings through art?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I mean, things that actually making art, the process of making art has made me able to, and having to talk about the art has made me able to articulate things that have bothered me about being Iranian American, had bothered me about the culture, about what's happening in Iran, or about even America's sort of stereotypes of Iranians, like all of these things that were painful for me as a child. I was able to put words to them after I made art about it.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if art helped me heal these emotions in some ways, but then also be able to talk about them, which is another form of healing and just talking about it makes you feel better sometimes, to get some like a messy emotion out. But then also to be able to communicate that with another person who might not understand this perspective that I have, like is powerful. So, but it was really through art that I was able to do that.
Is there another, I mean, I don't know if this is, is there one that you could talk about that?
Maybe not this one.
Maybe not this one. Quicker.
I could talk about this one.
No,
Let's keep this one. Okay, yeah, let's keep this one. This one's hanging in my home actually, and it has a lot of texture, like bas-relief texture. So you can't. Oh, sorry. It has glitter. Like, it's so much better in person. It comes alive when you see it in person because there's like pearl kind of paint, pearl, and when you move from left to right, like the light changes it, like glitter and all that. And so it's a very big painting. It's like tall, and it's sort of like my children when they were very young. When we were in New York City, we had a flood. We had floods, and that was really hard. My kids were quite young, and we had to move many times. Now we live in Washington, D.C. area, actually, and this was like an expression of that difficulty of being a parent, being a mother, and, you know, my parents kind of helping us. And it's sort of like, it's a horrible thing to show that we're like drowning because it's kind of like suffering in some ways, or struggle to keep children happy. You know, the children are kind of playful and they're happy and they're above the water while the parents, and it's kind of just to show, like, in a family, how I wasn't just thinking about my experience, I was thinking about my parents' experience raising us, you know, as immigrants, and maybe their parents' experience, and generations of what parents have to go through sometimes to provide for their children, to make, you know, to give a better life to their children, to make them happy. Sort of what you don't see under the surface is what this was about. it's an exaggeration of how I was feeling, maybe.
Everybody survived half.
It wasn't that bad, but I wasn't drowning. We were happy, but it's a way through art, going back to how it's a way to express a feeling that's very difficult, through a symbol.
Can you talk about this one? I love this one because it's true. Oh, sorry, you have a question.
I don't know.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, what's your favorite painting
That I made, maybe?
and which you see it?
Oh.
That's the second question. They're both really hard questions to answer.
Yeah.
I maybe go through phases for my own paintings, and even for I go through, I change my mind over time. And what is my favorite painting now? I mean, that's changed so much over the years, so it's hard for me to answer that.
But you have examples of your favorite artists. We could go back to that one.
I do. What's my favorite painting of mine? What's my favorite painting of mine is a hard one. So I would say Van Gogh painting. So the Museum of Modern Art, where I used to work as a lawyer, has this painting. Very famous painting, Starry Night, La Nuit Étoilée in French. And not just this painting, but his paintings of cypress trees, those trees. Yeah. In Farsi you say sarvenaz. I don't know how you say those kinds of trees. You have them in miniatures. They're kind of shaped like this. Yeah. The paintings of cypress trees are just incredible. They're so expressive, and there's so much, you could really feel his emotions. Talking about healing of emotions, you could feel that he's an artist of deep, powerful emotions. Just, if you ever have the opportunity to see his paintings in person, they're so beautiful. I mean, every brush stroke, it has texture. It's not flat. It almost looks like ceramics or tiles, I think. That's how I felt when I was young. So, yeah, I would say that painting or something similar. And my painting, I don't know. That's a tough one. I could click and show. If you click ahead and stuff.
I think your favorite color blue, isn't it?
You would think so. You would think that it's blue, but it's actually not. I do love blue, but my favorite color is probably fluorescent. Do you know fluorescent? Really bright colors, that you see in signs and stuff outside that glows, almost glows. I like really bright yellow, and a yellow that's almost like a yellow green. It really makes me happy. But I love the way, and orange too, a bright orange, electric orange. I like those two colors against blue. So when I paint the blue paintings, underneath I paint orange or yellow. So the first thing I do is I paint yellow or orange, and then the blue pops against the painting. It's vibrates. And when you look at the tiles in Uzbekistan or whatever, the blue, the turquoise, it has yellow too, right? Yeah. It also has yellow. I'm trying to find the painting that I would say is it. I think this is my favorite. This is in a museum in Connecticut in America. It's a permanently in a museum, and so for me that's very special to be in a museum collection. And if you see it in person, again, bas-relief and glitter, it's alive, it just comes to life when you see it because of the texture is very, very rich. You guys have been amazing.
Other questions? Anyone want to be an artist? I know.
Well, this
young lady
animation.
Does. Anyone else?
California is such a good place to go for animation.
I can always ask more questions, but I don't know if anybody else has anything.
We've last question.
Anyone?
Nope.
Any recommendations for? Negar's going to be going to Bukhara and Samarkand. Any
And Hiva is
recommendations?
Not
No,
gonna
he
consider.
doesn't have time for Hiva this time.
Yeah.
Any recommendations?
Kashkadarya.
What is that?
Traditional meals and as well with the historical places.
Yeah.
Such as Shakespeare or country also has and a different historical place for visiting for the art as well.
You just need to come back from
I have
time.
to come back.
Yeah.
My visit's too short.
What's your favorite country in terms of art?
Well, Uzbekistan is becoming like really, because I mean, I'm not kidding when I say that I really, really love it here. It's really special for me to come here, and I've always wanted to come here. So I would say this is going to be really high up on my list. But when I was young, France was like, I still, if I go to Paris, because to go to Iran, we had to stop halfway sometimes, and so we would go to Paris. And so I became very familiar with France at a young age, and I learned to speak French fluently. When I couldn't go to Iran anymore, there was a real sense of loss. And so I needed another culture, and French culture was something that just I loved so much. The food, the delicious pastries, and the art is amazing there too. So I would say there.
And also the biggest museum in Paris, Louvre.
The Louvre is huge. Yeah, it's a big museum. There's a lot to see. It's not my favorite museum, although their Islamic section is incredible. I do love that part of the museum where they have the Islamic art. It's amazing there.
And they just had that amazing Uzbekistan exhibition earlier this year.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
with he told us that his work was there. I would have liked to go there to see that.
With that, thank you all for being here. And I hope, for those of you who it's your first time here, I hope you will come again. Thank you to Negar for an amazing talk. Really appreciate it. And again, thank you all for being here. Thank you from American Center Tashkent. And thank you.